Hello, kids. Welcome to the Far Out Podcast. How you doing today? Me? Well, I've been better. I'm doing just okay. I'm just kidding. I'm doing all right, and I'm very thankful to be here to talk to y'all about things that interest me and what I've been up to, and that also includes stuff that have to do with pop culture, talking about the culture that pops and does not stop. And so we're going to dive into many different topics, but the first one I want to talk about is a movie that I saw recently, that being Starship Troopers. And if you're not familiar with this movie itself, or if you have not actually seen it yourself, you are probably more familiar with its impact overall on pop culture, as I previously said, because this movie has served as a piece of inspiration for many different pieces of fiction. Most recently, and I think at this point most notably, the game Helldivers 2. If you've played Helldivers 2, the sense of combat, the sense of militarism and patriotism that's all throughout that video game, even to a bombastic level, that game very much pulls from Starship Troopers. It very much uses that as a type of inspiration for the game. And so, even the alien bugs that you fight in Helldivers 2, they look, kind of similar in my opinion to the ones that you see in Starship Troopers. Even the armor that you wear looks a little similar. It's the same as the gun, so on and so forth. It's Helldivers is not Starship Troopers, the video game proper, but there's a lot of overlap there because I think art is meant to complement one each other, not meant to steamroll over one another. But anyway, we'll talk about Helldivers 2 more thoroughly here in a minute. But speaking on the film itself, the 1997 film Starship Troopers as a piece of media, this thing freaking rocks. I'll just say that outright. I really enjoyed revisiting this film, and I revisited it for several reasons. One of them being I've been playing a good amount of Helldivers 2 lately, and I love seeing the again a piece of inspiration that that game took, being Starship Troopers, and just kind of adapting that into a gameplay sense. And also, this is a movie that I'm not saying I watch it like once a year, but I try to keep it on like a bi-yearly rotation for myself, every 3 years, because this movie actually kind of has a special place in my heart because this movie, back when I was just a kid, just a wee lad, many, many years ago, I think I was around 13 or 14. This was a movie that I saw that made me want to genuinely try to get into the world of reviewing movies when I was just a kid. Because at that point I was watching, Star Wars, superhero stuff, animated stuff, and if you asked me, did you like it? I would say like, yeah, I liked it, or if I didn't like it, I'd say no, I didn't like it. But I would never dive into the thoughts that I had. I would never be able to parse through them in a way that's actually like concise and offers breakdown. I remember after I watched Starship Troopers, I was pretty struck by it for several different reasons. And this was the movie that made me want to literally write out my thoughts about the movie because I couldn't determine how to feel about it. There were things that I liked and things that I both disliked. And for me, just being a kid who was a pretty novice, enjoyer of films at that point, again, my taste kind of aligned into two camps. I either liked something or I didn't. And for this movie, when I first saw it, this was a movie where I was like, huh, I don't know how to feel about it. Let's get through that. But yeah, the more I've revisited this movie, the more times I've watched it, I've just grown in appreciation of it. And it had been a couple of years since I'd seen it recently, but I'm very happy to have rewatched it because this thing is a blast. I mean, from a visual perspective, it's amazing. Despite it being a product of the 90s, the visual effects still holds up. Like, look, is the lighting great? Is the comping great? Could there be a little more, of a better kind of seamlessness when it comes to, you know, the alien elements on like a real background? Like, of course, it could all look better. It could use a restoration. It could be a little more high def. That being said, the majority of the effects, of the special effects, the CGI based effects, are still great. They still pack a punch. They contain all the emotional relevance that they're meant to. But I mean, the real icing on this is everything that's physical and practical. Because again, this was made in the 90s where, you couldn't just put everything into a computer and just have that spit out stuff for you. There was still a lot of genuine craftsmanship that went into this. Things had to be built and be destroyed in a realistic manner. And this movie, when it leans into that, it soars. Like, seeing the weapon systems that are used by the Marines in this thing. Like if you look closely at the rifles while they're shooting at their enemies, the rifles are actually ejecting, you know, shell casings, so they're either using some form of dummy rounds or they're shooting blanks or whatever. But like the literal rifles that they're using function as a real rifle, and when they throw a grenade, there's real explosions. And like when a soldier gets, you know, overwhelmed by the aliens, when they get ripped in half, so on and so forth, there's a good amount of gore and blood that, really kind of accent the combat. Like this movie doesn't feel mindless because we follow the characters literally prior to them getting into the academy, training through the academy, and then being on their first, deployments and so on and so forth. And by following their trajectory throughout the entirety of the film, which it's not very long either. It's not like it's 3 hours, but just getting to see them literally go from being young pups into grizzled veterans when a when a soldier, even a no-name faceless soldier, gets killed by the bugs or suffers an injury, you feel that because you now have a sense that, oh, they went through the same boot camp that I just saw my main characters go through. They have the same sense of camaraderie. We just didn't get to follow them particularly because they weren't the actual characters of the film, but the ones that we understand them on a deeper level. And this film is really good at making you invested in the characters, in the world, wanting to see the hero succeed and wanting to see the enemies fail. The visual effects are great, the combat's great, the action is stellar, the dialogue is snappy. And this movie is freaking awesome from an entertainment level. I think it's really, really great. But then also from a commentary level, this film is also incredibly impactful because this movie is made by a guy named Paul Verhoeven, and he has a very deft hand on making things that are both entertaining and also social commentaries as well. He has directed movies such as, again, Starship Troopers, but also RoboCop, Total Recall, and a couple of others. And you look at RoboCop, for example. RoboCop is, look, on its surface, it sounds ridiculous and it sounds stupid. It's a movie called RoboCop. I wonder what that could be. I wonder how deep that could go. It's about a cop who gets turned into a robot and then he goes on and pursues crime that way. It sounds like a superhero, like a comic book. Despite that, despite the cheeseball popcorn in your face appeal of that movie has a lot to say. It comments on our social structures with how we treat criminals, and how we view police, how police can use excessive force, how we should treat different citizenry and so on and so forth. It has a lot to say on what a police state could look like if left unchecked, and how we need to have checks and balances when it comes to policing and so on and so forth. Yet it's still incredibly entertaining. That movie is not overhanded. Very similar with Starship Troopers, except where RoboCop deals with the policing aspect of social commentary. Starship Troopers deals with the military aspect of social commentary, where this movie is incredibly fun to watch and the whole jazz and all that bit. But it's a commentary on what a culture can look like when it's purely driven by militarism, by patriotism, so on and so forth. In the movie, you're watching these kids again literally graduate high school and college and and all that, and they're being told in the classroom that like the most important thing you'll ever do in your whole life is join the service and serve your species, because it's not just serving your nation, not just serving your community, because this movie is set on a intergalactic scale. So you're not just defending Earth, but you're also defending her colonies. You are serving humanity in a greater sense, and they lean into that sense of patriotism to where if you're going to do anything in your life, you should join the service. Why recycle when you could pick up a rifle? The only good bug is a dead bug, and the best way you can defend your family is, by golly, taking the hellfire to the enemy themselves. It's stuff like that. Then you enter the boot camp and you see how everything is ultra militaristic in that sense too, to where like you know the cadets are getting literally injured by their training officers, and it's not just like, oh no, like like I broke my arm and stuff. Like, I mean, at one point they're like practicing throwing knives, and like uh, a knife gets thrown through a trainee's hand, and they're like, ha, that's good training for when you handle a bug, their claws are razor sharp, medic, there's no sense of like there's no safety kind of takes a backseat to this whole thing. It's just like, look, this whole galactic war we're involved is a meat grinder, and you're just gonna have to get used to it. And we're gonna start your training literally on the training course because we're not gonna pull any punches. We're gonna yell. We're gonna injure you. We're gonna disqualify you for certain things. And like, you better get close to everyone around you, whether you're male, female, black, white, yellow, green, or in between. Like, you need to understand that these are your brothers and sisters in arms, and you have to have their back 110%. And so if you're a fan of Michael Bay type movies, of Call of Duty video games, and if you love a sci-fi angle to all this as well, you should definitely check out Starship Troopers because again, it's very entertaining. It's a blast to watch. I had a great time revisiting it, but also, I myself, I'm a patriot and everything, but like there was a bit of mirror holding with this movie to where I was like, like, yeah, there is a point to where your sense of patriotism and your sense of quote duty can be taken perhaps a little too far, even into a ridiculous sense. But look, at the end of the day, movies are meant to be an excuse me, they're meant to be a experiential event. Pardon my my tongue twister there. And I had a great experience watching Starship Troopers. It was a blast to revisit it. And if you have not seen the film in a while, I recommend that you pick it back up. But if you have not seen the film at all in its entirety, please visit it, check it out, and let me know what you think. And then if you have or have not played Helldivers 2, give that game a try. And then especially if you have played Helldivers 2 and if you enjoy fighting the alien bugs in particular, definitely check out this movie because I think it'll overall impact your time playing that game in an even greater sense. So yeah, Starship Troopers is a really, really good and interesting movie, and I hear that it's going to potentially get remade by a guy named Neil Blomkamp who made the movie District 9, which is also again a very cool sci-fi movie that also has a lot to say from a societal perspective. And so yeah, I think everyone should kind of get their quasi Starship Troopers, quasi RoboCop movie to where they can have something that's incredibly entertaining, but also offers a bit of reflection as well. And I just think this movie is a knockout from start to finish. And yeah, again, if you have not seen it, please, please check it out. Please consider checking it out. And then if you have or have not played Helldivers 2, see how this movie can impact that game. And yeah, I hope you have a good time with everything. And speaking of the previously mentioned Helldivers, that game is now getting its own film adaptation. And I gotta be honest, when this was announced, the popularity of the game was at pretty much an all-time high. It was growing on PlayStation. It had just come over to Xbox. People like me were getting the game and we were seeing how much fun it was. And then this announcement came, and I honestly thought that this announcement was more so just riding the hype of the game, continuing to put the name Helldivers out into the world to garner more attention. I didn't think it would amount to anything because after that announcement, it was just quiet on all fronts over at Sony. There wasn't any movement for months. There was no talk about it, not even any quiet whispers across like Twitter, so on and so forth. But now there appears to be some real legitimate movement. At least I hope so, because there is now a director attached to the movie. And the guy that will be directing the Helldivers movie, at least at this point in time, is a guy named Justin Lin. And if you don't know that name, you absolutely know his work because he has made a bunch of the Fast and Furious movies. He is the director of Fast and Furious 3 Tokyo Drift. Not my personal favorite, but I know some people who really appreciate that film. And so the guy behind the drift, as it were, is now attached to Helldivers. He also directed Fast and Furious 4, which again, not my favorite of the series. However, that film is considered kind of a turnaround point for the series. That's where it quote started to like get good, though I think Fast and Furious 1 and 2 are still quite good. I actually don't really like 3 that much, if I'm being honest. I know it's kind of a cult favorite amongst the fandom, but for me, Tokyo Drift, not the best of the bunch there. For me, though, what is the best of the bunch are the next two entries, 5, and 6. So Justin Lin did 4, 5, and 6 back to back to back for the Fast and Furious franchise. And in my opinion, 4 provided the foundation that Fast and Furious ran on for the foreseeable future. Fast and Furious 5 and 6, I think, are legitimately great movies. Not just great for their respective franchise, but I'm talking legitimately great action films, great heist films, great crime films. And I think that Fast and Furious 5 and 6 are really, really good movies. He did not do Furious 7 or Furious 8. In between those entries, though, he did do Star Trek Beyond with Chris Pine. That's the third in his respective trilogy. I think that movie is the best of its respective franchise. Well, not overall regarding Star Trek, but of the more modern trilogy of Star Trek films. He did the last entry in that franchise, and I think that one's the best. In fact, I have that one of the trilogy sitting on my Blu-ray shelf. I think that one's pretty good. But yeah, of the many numerous Star Trek films, I think there's like 10 total. I think Star Trek Beyond is quite good. Then he returns to the Fast and Furious franchise, and he does Fast 9 and Fast 10. And I gotta be honest, this guy was on an upward trajectory, having gone from Fast and Furious 4, 5, 6, then doing Star Trek Beyond. He comes back and does Fast and Furious 9 and 10. I did not like those movies. Now, granted, I'll give him some leeway. He is not the director of Fast 10, per his Wikipedia. I believe he was replaced. Yes, he was. There's an asterisk here. Replaced by Lewis Leiter. Yeah, sure, you go crazy, bro. But he did write Fast and Furious 10, so they kept his treatment for that movie. And look, he was hands on for F9. He was more so hands off for F10. Those movies are not that great. And I have not seen anything that he's done since. I'm not saying that, everything else has been poor, but nothing he's done past the last entries in the Fast and Furious franchise have really piqued my interest. He did something called Last Days in 2025. Never heard of it until this very podcast episode I'm doing right now, but now the next thing he has lined up for him is the Helldivers film adaptation. I'll say this though, of his filmography that I've seen, there's more great here than bad in my opinion. I think he's a knockout director. And also, like with Helldivers, it kind of is in the vein ish of Fast and Furious because Fast and Furious is over the top, it's bombastic, rambunctious, it's in your face, it's just this big action extravaganza. If Helldivers as a movie can actually succeed and become a cool property that actually gets put to screen, goes beyond the concept phase, that's what it should be because the game itself is like that. The game doesn't take itself seriously. As I said, it's very it draws inspiration from Starship Troopers, and Starship Troopers does take itself seriously, but it's not afraid to make fun of itself. It's not afraid to hold up a mirror to both itself and to the audience and saying, "Look, we're all having a good time, but you gotta admit this is a bit ridiculous." Helldivers 2 is the same way. It's absolutely fun and there is depth to it, but at the end of the day, it's a rambunctious action adventure shoot 'em up game that just makes you feel like a space marine blasting bugs and robots and aliens. Oh my. And if the game can have that same kind of if the movie can have that same kind of appeal, I think it's going to be a home run. I really do. So I want the material to be taken seriously. Like, don't treat it, with disrespect. Don't make, a DVD bin level movie. Absolutely put heart, soul, and sweat into this thing, but like understand what you're adapting here. You're not going for Shakespeare, and you're not going for something as, schlocky as like Spaceballs. You're going for something more akin to like a Star Wars or a Star Trek, which I know sounds basic, but like, Star Trek, very serious, absolutely has fun to it. Star Wars, much more of a popcorn type fare of movies, but can also be incredibly serious as well. And so I think that if the Helldivers adaptation can strike that balance, maybe a little more so on the fun side of things, I think it'll be good. And the fact that there is apparently some movement on this project, as it is not dead, absolutely does make me feel happy because I want this movie to come out. I think that in a world where we perhaps may never get another Starship Troopers movie, though. As I said, there is another rumored, revival of that in the works. Who knows? In a world where I can't get a direct sequel to Starship Troopers, or I can't get, another adaptation of that and whatnot, the fact that something kind of in the style of that and also in the style of Fast and Furious could be coming out as well, I think that's pretty good. And again, I think Justin Lin is a great director. If he chose to write this project as well, I think that would be pretty good as well. But I will say that I wonder if he himself should just stick as the director, then he can provide his kind of more creative sensibilities from a well-polished script. I think that if they got an A-plus writer to write a more kind of serious treatment, and then if Justin Lin says, this is great, I like this, I respect it, I'm just going to ease it down about 20%. I think that's kind of where that sweet spot might be. So, yeah, there is a Helldivers movie reportedly, supposedly coming, and now it has Justin Lin of the Fast and Furious franchise attached to it. So, yeah, hopefully it comes out. Hopefully it's good. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. Hey kids, I'm doing an impromptu addition to this episode of the Far Out podcast because I just saw Knives Out 3 Wake Up Dead Man, and that title makes me mad because the punctuation of it is wrong. It needs commas, and punctuation matters, as does spelling and the whole deal. It's not misspelled, but again, if you're gonna use grammar in a film, you should use it correctly, but I digress. But anyway, going on to the actual film, believe it or not, kids, I saw this movie in theaters. And you might be like, well, why does that matter? It matters, kids, because this movie, Knives Out 3, is a Netflix made movie. It's a Netflix original because back in the days of old when Knives Out was just a wee, young, plucky franchise, Netflix said, hey, this looks like a good idea. We know you want to do more of these movies, Mr. Ryan Johnson. Here's a blank check. Why don't you come over here and we'll make your movies, over at Netflix, and that's that. And Ryan Johnson of Star Wars Episode 8 fame, there you go. He said, sure, why the heck not? And look, it's a free country. He can do whatever he wants. He's a creative and he's looking to make money. He absolutely did. So fine. But Knives Out was a smash hit, very much in the vein of Clue, a classic whodunit, a great murder mystery. It was awesome. It sparked a franchise, and what should have been other great entries that went to theaters ended up getting this small, piddly release done by Netflix. Then it gets dumped on the streamer. And that was what happened with the second film in the franchise, Glass Onion, as it were. That is still a really good movie, despite it being on Netflix, despite it being a Netflix produced movie. That thing is quite good. And Netflix really isn't known for making good movies, in my opinion. They make good television series, but not movies. So that was a real diamond in the rough there. Glass Onion, Knives Out 2 did have a limited release theatrically. I believe it was out for a couple of weeks in a couple of theaters. I did not get to see it in theaters due to that very reason, with it having its limited release, which I think is ridiculous. But for Knives Out 3, I think that they also saw the writing on the wall with that limited release of Knives Out 2. They saw that that thing did some money, and so they decided to expand and perhaps lengthen the theatrical window of Knives Out 3 Wake Up Dead Man. Again, missing punctuation, but I digress yet again. Knives Out 3 is in theaters. It made it all the way here to Fargo, North Dakota, so good for us and whatnot. And I got to see the movie as the way it is meant to be seen in a theater. And what did I think of it? And the best way I can kind of break down my thoughts on it is to give a quasi spoiler review. I will consider this kind of an open discussion regarding the film. I won't give, blatant spoilers, but I will give context to scenes that I want to talk about. So if you'd rather go into this movie completely cold and not know a single thing about it, honestly, turn off the podcast or better yet, skip ahead. Continue listening, please. But if you don't care about Knives Out 3, then we'll just go on from there. But yeah, Knives Out 3, Wake Up Dead Man. This is an interesting entry in the franchise because the previous two entries in the franchise, Knives Out 1 and Knives Out 2, Glass Onion, were murder mysteries, serious in tone, very well crafted, yet there was also levity to them. There was fun moments. There was breathing room in those previous movies, despite it revolving again around legitimately murder, death, a killing. There was still fun to be had. Hence why the first one was such a crowd pleaser. Hence why Netflix went out and bought the darn thing. With Knives Out 3, there is not much humor in this at all, which is a big bummer for me. It's much more serious, much more straight, and it just kind of left a bit of a weird taste in my mouth. What left an even more weird taste in my mouth is the overall structure itself of the movie, because if you're going to tell a serious story like I'm about to describe to you, I would recommend that you include some levity. And perhaps the comedy that worked for the rest of the audience in my theater was, firing on all cylinders. Comedy itself is subjective, as is art overall, including movies as a medium. But for myself, I giggled like twice, where some other people were laughing a little more. But the problem, though, the reason why I highlight comedy off the jump here is because Knives Out 3 is the most sour of the trilogy thus far, because this movie has to do, the murder revolves around a priest in a church, part of the Catholic sect. There's some branch of it. They never outright say it, but you can infer just by how the priests are handling their business inside the church, and they're doing confessions and stuff like that. It's linked to the Catholic Church at large. This movie treats religion as a punchline for the majority of it, and it mocks religion because the person that we're trying to uncover the mystery of is this heretical priest, this kind of cult leader type of priest who manipulates people through scripture. I mean, and for someone who is a Christian, and I mean that sincerely, I'm not just someone who just says they're quote a Christian, to fill out a survey. I mean, I read my Bible and I pray and I fast and I try to go to church and all that stuff. For me to watch this movie, it made me feel really icky at times because they were setting up characters who are admittedly in villainous roles, yet it just wasn't very fun to watch. It wasn't very palatable because I'm watching this, admittedly, again, a bad guy, this priest, the guy who gets killed. I'm watching him be bad on screen, cementing his villain status in the film. Yet he goes about it in such appalling ways. It's like it was honestly hard for me to watch. And you might think, oh, you're being soft, it's fiction, don't worry about it. Well, it's true. It's like, for me, watching the movie, watching this guy clearly manipulate scripture and clearly deliver just awful messages to get people out of money, to envelop people in lust, to rule over them via fear, again, in a very cult like manner. And that's well on display in the movie. I understand it is a piece of fiction. I understand that the villain is meant to have villainous roots. The way in which the movie presents itself as giving us our hero and our villains, it's a tough watch. And the very opening of the movie itself actually shows someone defiling a church. And I'm not talking like they're tracking mud in on their boots and they're spitting and maybe, putting their cigarette out, in a pew. The opening of the movie shows a woman defiling a church, as in like tearing down crosses, ripping up oil paintings of the apostles, smashing the windows, so on and so forth. And again, there's later context for all this in the movie. In fact, it's not so, this is a minor spoiler. It's not so much done from the context of, you know, blasphemy. It's actually done in a way, this woman was so crazy because she was looking for something hidden in the church. And all bets were off at this point. She was so consumed by greed, she didn't care what she did. She went in and she just tore the place up because she needed to find this thing in the movie. That made the pill a little more palatable. But by the time that revelation came, I was already choking it down. The way the movie starts, seeing the church get destroyed, seeing people get literally physically abused, then following it up by again showing us the villain of the character, or the villain of the movie, which is this awful, inhumane priest. Then he gets killed, and then in comes our hero, played by Daniel Craig, former James Bond, and he's here to uncover the mystery behind his murder. And as you're going throughout uncovering that, you're also uncovering what made this person so evil and vile. And like it's tough because like I'm not saying I wanted to like leave, you know, but it was just really uncomfortable. I really didn't find it enjoyable, at least until there were payoffs for certain aspects, like again, when you find out that the church wasn't destroyed in just purely a state of blasphemy, it was destroyed, defiled in the pursuit of looking for something purely out of desperation. I gave a small sigh of relief. I still didn't like seeing the church get destroyed. Like, I don't know if Ryan Johnson, I don't know. I don't know him. I've never met him. I've never talked to him in any capacity. I don't know anything about him beyond what I read in the headlines. I don't know if he's Christian, atheist, agnostic, something else. Who knows? But like the fact that you open your movie up with all those things just back to back to back, that makes a statement, and I don't know, like this movie would to me was just really, really icky. And again, you know, coming off of Knives Out 1 and 2, which, have their own bit of social commentary in them as well, and that is that's a point of the movies that makes them what they are. It's not just a fun whodunit with cool characters and cool costumes and so on and so forth. There is a social commentary aspect to those movies, which is endearing and you appreciate it. This one, though, in whatever message they were trying to say in Knives Out 3, I didn't like it. As I said off the dome here, or off the start, I feel that this movie used religion and Christianity and the Lord as a punching bag. I feel that they used it in a way that did not necessarily highlight its strengths, about bringing people together. I will defend this movie somewhat, though, in that there is a legitimate polar opposite to the evil priest that we see get killed. There is a good incoming priest, fresh out of, um, you know, pardon my lack of proper wordage, or out of the academy, as it were. He's starting to become a minister, and you know, he's the classic, we got to bring people together. It's important to pray. It's important to confess. It's important to read the word. There needs to be a sense of community. He's the exact polar opposite of the bad priest that we see get killed in the movie. And so this young good priest who's full of nothing but optimism and hope, we also follow him as well. He's really more or less kind of the main character, even though Daniel Craig is the detective, is the Sherlock of the story. So there is that aspect to it where you do see the other side of the coin, where you have this heretical priest spouting his nonsense, and then you have this other guy, this young guy, who, despite him being involved in this murder, at least on a suspect level, he's trying to do the right thing. He's trying to bring people together, to spread the word, so on and so forth. And there are legitimate moments throughout the movie where everything kind of slows down and you see him present himself as a true, genuine preacher, where he preaches the word, and he listens to people, and he prays for them, and he comforts them in a way that I believe to be very godly. The 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 good priest that we follow gets moments to be a good priest, and you get to see that, and I felt that it was genuine. I'm just saying that up until that point, it was a very tough road to travel. I mean, again, just as a viewer, and it's, you know, I think that there's a line that needs to be crossed. There's a line that needs to be walked when it comes to doing this kind of evaluation on something as deep and as impactful as religion. Um, I'm not saying you should treat religion with kid gloves. It's it certainly has its own problems. Literally look to the Catholic Church at large and what's happened with them, and you know, not just talking about the Catholics exclusively. Lutherans have done it, so on and so forth. There are problems in the church that are incredibly heinous and are legitimately evil, and um, I hope that the necessary healing can come of that for whoever is affected by that. But having this presented in a movie, I, and it's my own fault personally because like I didn't watch any trailers for this. I didn't know anything about the movie. I went in literally completely blind. All I knew is that it existed. It was on, it was coming to theaters, and it starred Daniel Craig as the detective from the previous two. I didn't know it was about this, and so my mother and I were completely blindsided, and it was a really intense watch, and I wish there was more of an even-handedness when it came to the representation of faith in this movie. I wish that, um, yeah, I honestly just wish there was more of an even-handedness. I at least did not feel that. I did not get that sense from this movie. Again, I'm not saying it's out to tear down religion. I don't think it is because there are true, genuine moments where we get to see the love and the embrace of Christ on display in the movie. I'm just saying that by the time we get to see those things wrapped up in around this entire drama, it's like a little too far too late. I'll say this: the first two Knives Out movies, I feel you can watch with a family. I think they're more kind of mature family films. Now, again, there's crude jokes, there's swearing. You do see some people get killed, but I never thought it was overdone. I never thought it was too much to bite off. Again, hence why the first one was such a crowd pleaser, and that second one, also quite good as well. But again, a little more on the mature side. But I do genuinely think that these movies could be enjoyed with a family. The third one, I I don't know. I mean, it just you need to be in the right mindset for this kind of movie because again, the villain of the movie is a heretical priest, and so as you follow him, you're gonna see him be a piece of crap. And when he gets killed and the rest of it develops, again, you're further diving into his debauchery, and then you have the good priest, come in and somehow, some way, kind of save the day, and he has those moments. But that's the problem, though, is that it's moments. And so for me, this was a complicated watch. Um, I will probably never see it again. I did not find it very entertaining, even beyond all this extra stuff. It's just like, yeah, it was a tough sit through. I'll say that. And also just to kind of put some extra sprinkles on this ice cream here. Like just from a technical level, I also didn't like the movie either. Like the lighting in this movie, really weird choices. I think what they were doing is that they were going for a sense of like natural light, like whatever light source is in the room, that's it. They're not going to have any external lights behind the cameras and stuff. And so if someone turns on a lamp, the light source of that lamp is going to be the only piece of light literally lighting up the room. And so there is some kind of artistic integrity with that. Again, you're going for natural stuff, yada yada. You're getting a much more kind of down to earth feel with things, because things lit by torchlight are going to be lit by torchlight, so on and so forth. But I just didn't think it looked that good. And there are better examples of doing, quote, natural lighting. You look at The Revenant with Leonardo DiCaprio, that thing was supposedly shot with all natural light, and, all that extra jazz. That thing looks incredible. That thing looks like $1 billion. Knives Out 3 looks like a Netflix movie, and look, I'll say this, Ryan Johnson aside, as again, whatever kind of person he is, and setting aside Episode 8 from Star Wars as well. Again, not something I truly love, though I've grown in appreciation of that film a little bit over the years. I'll say this though, he's a heck of a writer. This thing is written incredibly. I've seen a lot of movies. I've seen a lot of murder mysteries. I didn't know where this thing was going. When the reveals happen, when you see the sleight of hand things, when you see the tricks that went into the murder, I was like, I had no idea. I had no idea. Truly, at the end of the movie, when the credits were rolling, I turned to my mom and I said, I thought someone else had committed the murder. I was, I did not see it coming, and so to weave that kind of web, to tell that kind of story, to keep the characters interesting and to keep the dialogue mostly good, like it's a testament to good writing. Did it equal an overall good product? In my opinion, no. And again, from from an entertainment level, it's the weakest of the bunch. From a technical level, weakest of the bunch, and from a literal cultural, what does this movie want to say with its runtime, with its story, with its execution? I'd say this thing is more anti-religion than it's for religion. You know, and again, I'm just speaking from a Christian perspective. It's just again being a Christian and a conservative because they do touch on conservatism as well on this. Like it just wasn't for me. You know, it just didn't work with me. And so, if you're going to watch this movie, I would say that you should have a bit of a defense to this. You should probably guard your heart when it comes to this one. And if you have to do that for a movie, you have to also have to ask yourself this then. If I have to guard my heart to watch a movie, should I even watch it at all? You know, and I guess I'll just leave it up to you. And so again, Knives Out as a franchise. Cool, fun, great. From a certain perspective, again, Ryan Johnson was able to kind of reinvent the murder mystery franchise in a very fun way with that first film. Follows up on it to a certain degree with the second one. And then in the third one, Wake Up Dead Man. I thought it was all out the window. I don't know what I was watching. So, look, would I watch a fourth one? I think so. I think I would. But, and again, part of my injuries are self inflicted. I would have to do a lot more research on the fourth installment than I would this one because this is one that I went in blind on and I kind of paid the price for that. So, yeah, but anyway, if you do decide to watch Knives Out 3, comment down below. Let me know what you think. It is playing in cinemas now. I don't know how wide its theatrical release has gone, but eventually it will come to the Netflix, as it were. And so, yeah, yeah, Knives Out 3. A lot of interesting choices going on with that movie, and yeah, kind of an interesting result in the end, ultimately. Moving on, kids. This is kind of another impromptu addition to the podcast because I was not planning to talk about this. However, this topic came via a suggestion left by a viewer who left a comment on an episode. And so, if you kids have anything you would like me to potentially talk about, drop a comment down below and I will consider talking about the things that you think I should talk about. And for this comment in particular, this viewer asked if I would watch the latest trailer for the latest Hunger Games movie, which is Hunger Games Sunrise of the Reaping, I think. I can't remember the name of the movie properly, even though I just saw the trailer. But anyway, I'll talk about the trailer and all that jazz. So here's the thing about the Hunger Games. I was in the bag on the Hunger Games franchise back when this thing was coming out. I remember when the books were still being published, like when that was like in its first run. I read the original trilogy while I was in high school. I thought they were great. I thought that they were really awesome. And then the movies came out and I thought they were awesome as well. I saw those in its original run as well. I saw all four of them because they split book number three into two movies. They went for the Harry Potter treatment of it all. You could tell that was more of a cash grab than anything. Even I, being a teenager at that time, I was like, you don't really need to do this. Harry Potter 7 and 8, like that last book is a dictionary. That thing is massive. Hunger Games 3, Mockingbird, Mockingjay, whatever it's called, that thing did not need to be split into two movies. And I think that the overall ending of that kind of four-part franchise suffered because they really wanted to stretch that taffy, and well, frankly, I think they stretched it so far it broke. Here comes Hunger Games once again, and they're doing a prequel series based off of a couple of books. I think that the original author, I can't remember her name. I think it's Susan Collins. Don't quote me on that. I know that she wrote more books in the franchise, and in fact, one of the movies that recently came out, the Hunger Games, Snakes and Ladders, whatever that one's called. When she announced that she was writing a new book in the franchise, going back and telling a prequel story, Lionsgate, the company behind the original movies, they gobbled that thing up like it was a bunch of Tic Tacs. They were like, yoink, we're going to take that. We're going to turn your book into a script and everything. So that thing got cranked out pretty quick. I never saw Hunger Games, Snakes and Ladders. I had no, excuse me, I'm laughing. I had no interest to see that movie because I thought that the story had already been told. Frankly, I had no interest in going back to this franchise. And that's kind of interesting because you're like, what are you talking about? The Star Wars prequels. That's true, I do. For some franchises, I like going back. I like continuing to exist in that storytelling landscape. Star Wars, I'm in the bag on, and I'll see prequels to other things like Marvel movies, DC movies, so on and so forth. For Hunger Games, I felt no appeal towards Snakes and Ladders, and so I skipped it. And I know people that saw the movie though, and they said that they liked it. So good for them, good for the Hunger Games fans that are still wanting more from this franchise. But I had no interest in seeing Snakes and Ladders, and I have no interest in seeing um, the Hunger Games, whatever this one's called, the Grim Reaper's Meadow or something. I'll say this though, the trailer itself for Grim Reaper's Meadow, it's quite good. They You could tell that Lionsgate is putting all the money into the Hunger Games franchise because Lionsgate doesn't really have a lot of franchises. They have John Wick and they have the Hunger Games and maybe something else, but they're kind of a smaller studio. And so for them to go back to this they're going to give everything they've got into these things. And look, there's legitimate production value on display here, even in the trailer itself, not just from the imagery shown, not just from what the movie itself is going to look like, because the movie the movie looks like it's going to be really artistic. It has a great kind of A24 sense to it. So if you're into the more kind of artsy dartsy movies, I think this one is going to perhaps scratch that itch just from an overall, kind of set dressing type of way and costume wise. I think it's going to be kind of up that alley. But also like the use of color, the use of how they literally splice the screen, how they splice the image as you're watching, the trailer. It's cool because like, the Hunger Games has their countdown, the games will begin in 10, 9, 8. And in the trailer for the Grim Reaper's Meadow, as they're doing 10, 9, 8, the numbers flash up onto the screen and that cuts the literal image of the trailer into so many different colors and so many different shapes. And it's genuinely interesting. You don't see that in a whole lot of trailers. And so they're going all out. And does that mean I will see this movie? No, probably not. Again, I heard that the first prequel, Snakes and Ladders, was quite good. I had no interest in seeing it, and I have no interest in seeing the Grim Reaper's Meadow. Frankly, no matter how good it is, unless I hear it is just the greatest film, like of the whole year, I am probably going to skip on it. But I appreciate the suggestion brought forth via a comment. I appreciate that interaction, and I'm not saying anything to harsh anyone's vibe. If you're looking forward to the Hunger Games movies, if you're looking forward to the continuation of this prequel, portion of the franchise, that's great. I'm happy for you, sincerely. I like when a world of storytelling exists, you should never close the door on it. Yes, things are meant to have a proper end, but like there is rich storytelling to be told inside of the Hunger Games franchise. It's just for me, I feel that my time with the franchise has passed, but sincerely, if you're looking forward to these movies, that's great. I hope you enjoy. I hope you have a good time, and I hope that they continue to make more for the fans out there. As for myself, while this is a good trailer and it might be a good movie, I have no interest in seeing this one. And so, yeah, the Hunger Games Grim Reaper's Meadow could be good, could be great. Who knows? I will personally not know. But if you yourself see this one, comment down below and let me know what you thought. All right, kids, let's get out of the world of movies for a bit and return to the world of video games because Battlefield 6 is the gift that keeps on giving. If you've listened to the podcast previously, you will know that I absolutely adore this game. I think that this is a true return to form for the Battlefield franchise, and for me, it's just a lot of fun. Game in, game out. I find it to be incredibly detailed and just a really thorough experience top to bottom. And I'm still working through the campaign. And while it has not, quote, wowed me per se, with its offering there, I still find it fun. I still appreciate it being there, especially since the franchise has not had campaigns in previous entries. But look, all that aside, the base game aside, and everything like that, the updates now for the game are rolling out. And at the time of this recording, there is the winter update for Battlefield 6, and this brings forth some pretty cool things, in my opinion. I wish that there was a proper snow map for Battlefield 6 because, much like Halo, I think Halo kind of strives and excels when it's using multiple biomes for different maps and level design. Battlefield is the same way. You can have urban combat, forest combat, jungle combat, desert, Arctic, naval, you name it. And so far, it's really that kind of a limited offering. And I was hoping that this update would bring a proper snow map instead though for this update, they have redressed a current map, a New York City based map, and add some snow and some ice to it. And so I thought it was purely a cosmetic offering. Now the streets are slick with ice, there's snow covering skyscrapers and yada yada. Oh no, I spoke too soon on Battlefield. I wrote them off too early on this one. There's a lot that goes into this winter update, so much so that it actually affects gameplay because in this winter update, on the winter map specifically, there are new and interesting ways to play the game because the cold is not just for cosmetic. The cold is actually a real part of the game and it will affect you as you play throughout the game. In the cold environments, when you're moving through the city and you've got your gun up and whatnot, if you're out in the cold too long, if you're not next to a heat source, your guy will literally get cold and freeze. So much so that there will be frost that appears on the edge of your screen and it will close in, it will envelop your vision. You will also lose health because your guy is getting frostbite, and your aim will be affected as well. Your guy will start to shiver, your line won't be as straight, and you will literally have to counteract that weapon movement with your stick and whatnot. And I did not know that. I truly thought this was just a cosmetic, just a redressing of some maps to add a more kind of winter feel. They really kind of gave us a quasi different mode, a different way to play the game now, to where there are certain choke points that are much more valuable as opposed to others because to counteract those cold spots, there are hot spots throughout the map as well. There's things like trash fires and other heat sources. And so if your guy is freezing and shaking and you don't know what to do, if you can, and they're everywhere, if you can find a heat source, you have to go stand next to it and your guy will thaw, and then that's when you replenish health and your aim will get more stable and so on and so forth. And it's great, and there are new challenges. Kill so many guys next to a heat source, kill so many guys while battling frostbite, get revives while frostbite, get revives next to a heat source, so on and so forth. It's cool. It's legitimately cool. And then on top of that as well, there's also new cosmetic stuff for your character, new Arctic skins, new melee weapons such as an ice pick. And I gotta say, like Battlefield 6, I'm sorry I doubted you. I really am. I thought you were putting kind of a white coat of paint on things for, the month of December here, but no, you offered a pretty cool way to play the game. And if you're looking for something a little different from the standard bang bang and pew pew, if you want to bang bang and pew pew in the snow and then get affected by that, jump into the winter update for Battlefield 6. I think it's a cool way to play the game. And yet Battlefield 6, just from top to bottom, I think this game is just a freaking blast. And if you have not tried it, please consider getting it for yourself. Treat yourself this holiday season for Battlefield, and then when you realize that it is a great game as well, get it for someone else. Give the gift that keeps on giving, and gift Battlefield 6 to someone else, and then continue to play the game. And yeah, it's really great. I'm glad to see Battlefield return to its strength, and yeah, this winter update is one of them. So yeah, hop in the game and have a good time. And speaking of the previously mentioned Halo franchise, there's kind of a bittersweet event going on with Halo, and that's that the latest entry in the franchise, Halo Infinite, has celebrated its fourth year in existence, its fourth anniversary. And I say that that's bittersweet because if you don't know, Halo Infinite will now no longer receive any large scale updates. The studio, formerly 343 Industries, now Halo Studios, that's literally the name of the studio, Halo Studios. Cool name, I guess, whatever. They're underneath the Microsoft umbrella. They're looking forward now. They're looking to the future of the franchise, which is a little ironic because the next entry in the franchise is going to be a remake of the first game in the franchise. So by going backward, they're going forward, and go crazy. Look, I'm looking forward to Campaign Evolved. I think it's going to be great. I think it's going to be a knockout. I'm glad that that game is coming back. It's Combat Evolved is now getting remade for modern audiences, and it's coming to PlayStation as well. I think that that's awesome. Fun does not die; it just ages, and in this case, it ages and then it gets a new coat of paint. Talking about Halo Infinite, though, it's bittersweet. It's bittersweet for many different reasons. First of all, is that Halo Infinite was meant to be so much more. And I don't know anything about game development. I've never met anyone at the studio. I'm just a passionate fan of this franchise. What Star Wars is to me for movies, Halo is to me for video games. I'm in the bag on Halo like so deeply, it's crazy. And so I was following the development of Halo Infinite very closely. I remember when it was announced. I remember where I was when that first trailer came out, and it took my breath away, and I thought it was incredible. And going from games like Halo 4 and Halo 5, games that really did change up the overall formula of what made Halo, in my opinion, pretty great. Going from Halo 1 to Halo Reach, Halo Reach kind of being a little bit of a black sheep there because they did add some new things, but I think Halo Reach perfected the formula that was Halo. And then I think Halo 4 and 5 lost that formula. And then here comes Halo Infinite, promising to kind of bring it back to the days of old. They're going to go for a more Halo 3 meets Halo Reach feel, both in terms of gameplay, weapon handling, cosmetics, the art design, you name it. And it almost sounded too good to be true. And frankly, in my opinion, it turns out that it was. Halo Infinite was not only delayed a full year, but in it being delayed a full year, I don't know that even that really saved it. What we got as the finished product when it came out was a lot of half-baked things, in my opinion. Not a lot of modes for its multiplayer. The campaign was lacking many basic features. The campaign being its strongest offering, I feel, in my opinion. That campaign is legitimately amazing, but there was still a lot left to be desired. As I previously said, Halo is known for having great biome diversity, and that way you can have a snow map, a desert map, and that's what every Halo campaign has offered. They've offered a lot of different variety in their missions. Halo Infinite really went with just more of a forest type landscape, and then you go inside various interiors and you're fighting down metal hallways, and that's cool and that's great. But I know that there was a lot more planned for this game. I know that there was more in terms of overall world design, level design, different missions, more variety, so on and so forth. And when Halo Infinite was coming out, there was the idea that this was going to be a true, genuine platform for the franchise. I think it was adequately named Infinite because I think that they thought that this entry would frankly be the foundation for many years to come. And if you know anything about the game and its behind the scenes, goings ons and stuff like that, uh, while this was never absolutely confirmed, it was stated numerous times that this Halo Infinite was meant to be, quote, the next 10 years of Halo. And now, looking back on it, could that have been more of a poetic saying? Yes, of course. But I think that there was a true, genuine mission statement behind it. I think that the studios that be over there at Microsoft, I think they genuinely did think we're going to be playing Halo Infinite for 10 years, that the game's going to get updated through its cosmetic offerings, through its multiplayer, and through its campaign. Because if you go back and if you're a super nerd like I am, I'm not a data miner per se. I don't even know what that really is, but there's people who are so good with computers that they can break down the codes of certain things, including video games, and they can see what's pending updates, what's pending approval, what's going to be released, what was removed, so on and so forth. And these people, they claim to have found inside the code of Halo Infinite that there was other code in place meant to serve as the doors for multiple campaigns. And so throughout the history of the franchise, you play Halo 1, you have one multiplayer, one campaign. Halo 2, one multiplayer, one campaign, so on and so forth. So each entry in the franchise furthers furthers along the story. Halo 1, Halo 2, Halo 3, so on and so forth. Halo Infinite had its base campaign, and then I feel that there were plans in motion to bring forth additional campaigns. And so now you have the sequel to Halo Infinite not being Halo Infinite 2, but rather an expansion that truly built on the foundation of its base game and was just slotted in. Would it have costed more money? Yeah, I'm sure. If you're essentially selling a whole nother game without actually shipping it as its own individual thing, it's essentially glorified DLC. Now, would I have bought that and would I have eaten that up with a fork and a knife? You betcha. Because the Halo Infinite campaign, I think, as I said before, is legitimately amazing. And so the idea that their plans for further story content were cut short was really sad. And the idea that now it has been more so official that Halo Infinite will not receive any future updates. And you might be thinking, well, what updates? It's been 4 years. There's no new story content. Well, because that's frankly because the updates we've received thus far over the last 4 years have been exclusively multiplayer, where they're bringing in new modes, new weapons, and new pieces of armor. Now, for me, who loves the franchise completely in every facet, that's great. It gave me new things to play consistently, and I really enjoyed it. And I do think that what they brought to the franchise with their updates have been legitimately good. But I long for more Halo storytelling. I long for the next installment in the franchise that pushes the narrative forward. As I said, I can't wait for Campaign Evolved, retelling Halo 1, but I've played Halo 1. I've played that game so many times, I could quote it to you chapter and verse. And I know how that game ends because we have Halo 2 and 3 and so on. I'm going to play Campaign Evolved. I really am. But I want to know what happens next after Halo Infinite because that campaign is so freaking good. And it ends in such an interesting way. In Halo Infinite, look, as I said, I don't know what happened behind the scenes. I don't know if they had a lot of, well, I know, I have an idea of what went down. I think that there was a lot of internal turnover with management, employees, so on and so forth. I think that there was a lack of overall vision. I think that everyone wanted to do something, but they couldn't unify on a specific thing. I think Microsoft also was, sticking its hands in things and so on and so forth. I think Halo Infinite suffered from being overly ambitious, having too many cooks in the kitchen, and a lack of unified vision. You can take that for whatever it's worth, but the finished product that we got with Halo Infinite, the one that came out 4 years ago on disc and digital, the game that I bought the very first day it came out with my best friend in the whole wide world, shout out him, like that game was only a fraction of what I think we were meant to play. And sadly, Halo Infinite never really recovered beyond that. You only get to make a first impression one time, and the first impression of Halo Infinite was not good. And I would describe, after 4 years, um, I would describe Halo Infinite in one singular word: frustrating. Frustrating is the word I would use for Halo Infinite. Frustrating from a game perspective, and that I think it took more steps back than I did forward. Frustrating from a storytelling perspective that there aren't future adventures in the pipeline for it. Frustrating that we waited this long for another entry in my favorite franchise, and this is the way it came out. I think that there's a lot left to be desired. That being said, despite me saying that, despite me speaking very harshly against it, what is there? And what was on day one and what is now present after 4 years, I do think is a legitimately good offering. I think Halo Infinite is worth the money, but it could have been so much more. I think again, building on the pedestal of Halo Reach, I think there could have been more modes, more ways to play, more weapons, you name it. But what they did add, I think, is good, and even the gameplay as well. Again, stripping it down from the fast movement of Halo 5 and Halo 4, and much more being aligned with the slower-ish movement of a Halo 3 mixed with a Halo Reach type environment. I think that's the way to go. I think that the overall gameplay formula that exists in Halo Infinite is what the franchise should be going forward. In a world where Halo must now have sprint and all these other things, you know, Halo Infinite, I think, is the best way forward. I do miss the days of Halos 1, 2, and 3, where it's just, you know, your jump button, your crouch button, and your shoot button. Plus, I guess you can also throw grenades, if you know what I mean. Really, in the original Halo trilogy, there were only really three things you had to worry about. That was your gun, your movement, and your crouching. And your jumping as well. But now in Halos 4, 5, and so on, you've got clamber, you've got all this extra stuff, and they're cool additions, but it's like, you know, Halo was a really simple franchise from a literal technical perspective of how you yourself as the player interacted with the controller. Really simple, really easy to pick up. Halo 4 got complicated. Halo 5 got even more complicated, and now Halo Infinite eased it back. If we could ease it back a little more, that'd be great. But if not, I think Halo Infinite is the way going forward. And so, yeah, look, Halo Infinite 4 years later, I've had a lot of fun with this game. I still play the game to this day. I'm playing the campaign another time through. I still play multiplayer, and I still go back and I replay the old games because they're there. They're there via the Master Chief Collection. And if you have the previous entries, on disc and whatnot, if you have an old 360, go nuts. They're there. They will always be there. No one's taking them away from you, but it's like, I want the franchise to continue on. I don't want to just replay the hits. I want new offerings. And yeah, for Halo Infinite to, quote, get 4 years out of its planned 10, no matter how concrete that plan was, I remember where that was stated, and I remember who said that, a former studio had as well. Like, I was there, kids, when they said a 10-year plan. For the game now to have gotten 4 years out of its 10, and for the studio to say, hey, the game's not going away, we're not shutting it down, we're just saying that we're kind of diverting resources elsewhere now to the future of the franchise. It's bittersweet overall. That being said, as I said, Halo is looking forward now. They're remaking Halo 1, which is great. I will be there day one. And there's also other entries being made in the franchise as well. There are multiple games in development. I personally think there are three. I think there's the Halo 1 remake, which is campaign only. I think there is a only multiplayer game coming, which hopefully builds again on the foundation of Halo Infinite. And then I think that there is a proper sequel to Halo Infinite somewhere. It just stinks that perhaps that last one is so far off, but who knows? Sky's the limit. The future is bright for Halo. It just, man, when I found out that when I heard that it was the 4 year anniversary of Halo Infinite, I was like, 4 years. It's been 4 years. I remember when that game was announced. Like, man, But yeah, look, I love Halo. I do. I'm gonna be here for every entry in the franchise until something happens. Like who knows what's gonna go on with with Xbox as a brand and whatnot. But whatever platform Halo releases on, I will be there until they say we're done. That's it. No more Halo games. But until that day comes, God forbid, I will be there. And I want to say thank you to everyone who worked on Halo Infinite, who got it over the finish line, and who got another entry in the franchise out, even if it was complicated and a lot was left to be desired. Thank you for a fun offering. Thank you for a fun game that I still play to this day. One that I play not just by myself, but also with friends. Like, you did so much right. And in the way that you were trying to build off of what was done right with the previous entries of the franchise, again, looking at Halo Reach and admittedly some right things done with Halo 4 and Halo 5 as well. If you can now go forward, looking back on what you did right with Halo Infinite included, I think you're going to do great. And so, Halo Infinite, here's to you. I'm cheersing you. Thank you for 4 fun years. Let's go another four, and then I'll see you on the next virtual battlefield when the next Halo game comes out. But yeah, at the end of the day, just play Halo and give Halo Infinite some love if you have not played it in a bit. All right, kids, let's move on. I've buried the lead deep enough now, and I'm, of course, referencing the very title of this podcast episode because, yes, I auditioned for a movie. And this is not some, college fan film, type of thing. No, I gave a real audition for a real movie, something that's going to be a big production and hopefully be a big smash hit when it comes out. And I did not audition for just any movie. In fact, this is very on brand for this very podcast because I've been talking about this particular brand of movies for some time now, pretty much since the inception of this very podcast. Believe it or not, I actually auditioned for a DC Studios movie. I've spent so much time talking about DC and being excited about their trajectory and what they're trying to do with their future that I decided, well, let's see if I can become a part of that future. Let's see if I can help shape a chapter in the new brand of DC storytelling. And so, yeah, the universe that consists of Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, there's a movie coming out that I auditioned for, and this movie in particular is set to release in 2028 and is titled Dynamic Duo. And this movie has to do with the followings of Dick Grayson and Jason Todd. And if you don't know who those characters are by name, you'll know them by their alter egos. Dick Grayson was the first Robin, so the apprentice to Batman, so his sidekick. After Dick Grayson graduates from being Robin's sidekick, when he grows up, he goes on to develop the Teen Titans to leave them for a bit, and then he goes on and he gets a solo career under the character name of Nightwing. And so after Robin grows up and becomes, a young lad, he assumes that kind of mantle. And then Jason Todd is another Robin after Dick Grayson leaves the Bat household. Batman, Bruce Wayne, decides he needs another Robin, that dynamic that he's had with a sidekick to himself. He realizes he needs another apprentice, and so he finds another Robin named Jason Todd. Except whereas Dick Grayson excelled not only as Robin but also into an eventual team leader of the Teen Titans and then onto a solo career as a quasi Batman figure as the name Nightwing. Jason Todd was more of a bad egg. Jason Todd was Robin, yet he was increasingly violent. He had a hard time restraining himself. Batman constantly had to kind of reel him back, and he was more of a liability than an asset. He was a loose cannon, this Jason Todd kid. So anyway, Batman and Robin, Jason Todd, they go out, they're fighting crime, and Jason Todd gets captured by the Joker. Batman can't find him. The plot is so heavy and muddled that Batman just can't figure out where the Joker took him. And while the Joker has Jason Todd all tied up and roped up and stuff like that, he's just mercilessly beating on him. I mean, just giving him the business, and it's in the storyline that I'm referencing where, the death of Jason Todd, spoiler for this, but, the death of Jason Todd, the Joker's using a crowbar on him and it's just letting him have it. And finally, by the time Batman arrives to the scene of Jason Todd's capture, it's too late. That the Joker has rigged the building that he's held in to explode. Batman doesn't get there in time, and so after the Joker has beat Jason Todd within an inch of his life, the building explodes, seemingly killing Jason Todd. But of course, in comics, no one ever fully stays dead, and so Jason Todd ends up surviving all this miraculously. And fueled by his aggressive tendencies and fueled by a sense that Batman, supposedly the greatest superhero ever, the greatest detective on the planet, the fact that he couldn't find Jason Todd when he was captured by the Joker, this led him to believe that Batman had abandoned him personally, that he had felt that he couldn't rise up to the former Robin, Dick Grayson, and so that Batman said, you know what? I'm going to quasi wipe my hands clean and, accidentally not be able to find him. And so Jason Todd, surviving, recuperating, he is fueled by anger and revenge, and he becomes this villain, or more so kind of an anti-hero now in modern renditions, known as the Red Hood. And so Jason Todd, former Robin, trained by Batman, ends up turning on Batman and becomes this crime-focused vigilante who uses weaponry and kills people. And on occasion, he will fight for good and will try to save the occasional person and maybe even help Batman if it ends up, furthering his ulterior motives. But really, Jason Todd is a failed attempt at a Robin type character, and he ends up becoming a villain. And so you have this dynamic, the dynamic and dynamic duo, where Dick Grayson, the first Robin, goes in the correct direction. Again, graduates from being a Robin character into becoming the leader of the Teen Titans, then goes on to become Nightwing. Then you have Jason Todd, who goes the opposite direction, sort of graduates from being Robin, and ends up pursuing a life of crime fueled by hatred and revenge. And this is what the movie Dynamic Duo, set to be released June 30th, 2028, is going to be based upon. It's going to be based upon those two characters, Dick Grayson and Nightwing, and Jason Todd, known as the Red Hood. And it's going to revolve around them having to navigate each other and being tied to the Batman and all that other stuff. There's not a lot of plot details about what this movie will be. We're not really sure if it's Nightwing versus Red Hood, if they're going to work together but be kind of quasi-antagonists, if they're going after the Joker, if they're going after Batman. We're not even sure if Batman will be in this movie. This more or less is a movie centered around a couple of Batman sidekicks after they again have left the role of being sidekicks. But anyway, this movie is really unique from that sense, in that it is essentially a Batman movie without Batman in it, or that remains to be seen. I was not expecting this movie to exist. I was thinking that somewhere along the trajectory of DC Studios, there would be a Robin type character. I assumed it would be Dick Grayson, because that's, when you think of Robin, when you think of that character, that's usually who people associate with him. Again, he is kind of the poster child for how to do that character correctly when it comes to storytelling. Then you have, again, a more edgier type of approach with a Jason Todd. And so I assumed at some point that Robin would exist alongside this new universe of storytelling that began with Superman and Creature Commandos and so on and so forth. But I wasn't sure how they were really going to do that. So the idea now that this movie centers around a, a pair of former Robins that are going to be well beyond, their time with the Batman in their career. Because again, by having Nightwing be a central character of this movie, this would state to some degree that he's been Robin for some time now, that perhaps we missed the time of him being the apprentice to Batman and the leader of the Teen Titans, and he just goes on to be Nightwing. We might be dropped into a further point in these characters' trajectories than what we're normally used to, which I don't mind, kind of similar to how Superman the movie did that with its latest rendition of the character, is that film takes place several years into Superman's tenure of being the hero. So, we'll get dropped into the story of Dick Grayson and Jason Todd, respectively, a dynamic duo. But this is also an interesting movie just from a purely production standpoint, in the sense that this is not a live action movie and this is not purely a animation type movie. It's a mixture of both. I think it's more so a mix of 70-30, but this is a animated movie that's going to feature CGI elements, stop motion elements, puppetry, and live action. They're putting all the eggs into one basket with this one. They're using all the tools in the toolbox. There's going to be a mix, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and that's how the movie's going to come out. And this is being developed under DC Studios, Warner Brothers Animation, and another studio, a relatively new studio called Swaybox Studios, which is really leading the charge when it comes to this overall blending of the creative forms of being animation, puppetry, live action, and so on and so forth. And Swaybox Studios put out an open audition call to be a part of this production. And this is it. Like, anyone who saw this announcement, who saw this link, could audition. It was open. It said you don't need any references, you don't need to have any history in the industry. Anyone and everyone could send in an audition to be a part of this movie. And so the same process that I went through, which I will detail to you in just a minute, heck, freaking Leonardo DiCaprio could have done the same thing, who knows, but it was an interesting process. It was an interesting thing to do this, to give an audition for a movie. Now, let me be clear. I don't want to make this sound any bigger than, it needs to be. I wasn't auditioning for, the roles of Nightwing or Red Hood. In fact, I don't know who I was auditioning for. There are very little details about this movie. Again, don't really know any ideas of the plot, don't really know any ideas of who's going to be in it besides Nightwing and Red Hood, and there was nothing else revealed in the description of the audition process. I don't know if I was going for a hero role, a villain role, big, small. For all I know, I could have been a bystander number 3 on the street. Who knows? But this audition also was not for a voice role. They made that very clear, that this was not to provide the voice of a character. What the audition was about, if I remember the description correctly, it was about potential puppeteering and physical capture reference, meaning that while I might not be the actual literal person, quite literally pulling the strings on the figurines to make them move, what I would have done had I been hired is that I would have served as a reference point or some capture protocol to provide physical reference for the characters. So perhaps if I were to have been hired, I would have been, the physical, real live action motion for this project. And, again, I don't mean to bury the conclusion either. Just judging by my verbiage, you can tell that I did not get the part. They did reach back to me, Swaybox Studios, and they said, "Hey, we appreciate your submission, but we're going on another trajectory." And I kind of always assumed I had like a snowball's chance in hell when it came to this part of my French. But like, look, like the fact that this was an open audition, meaning anyone could literally audition, meant I could have done it, or legitimate premiere actors could have done it. So I'm sure that they received thousands of applications of auditions. And so, was I one of the potential thousands? Yes. And was I very happy to be potentially considered? Of course. But I'm not saying I like gave up on myself, but I knew I was one among many trying to get this position. But really, what the audition was, again, despite all that stuff about me not progressing forward with it, is that, again, wasn't for a speaking role. And in regards to it being referenced for physical capturing and puppeteering, is that what I did is I videotaped myself. This is all per the description from Swaybox Studios. And they said, hey, you're going to submit 2 clips. One of them is going to be you telling us about yourself, like a standard interview, and explaining why you think you should be a part of this project and just kind of break yourself down inside of, what was it, 30 seconds to a minute. And then the second part is that you need a ruler, so a classic 12-inch ruler, and you would hold it in front of the camera, and you would try to mimic actions that were presented on a screen. And so Swaybox Studios, they put out this link, and they said, here is this video. You're going to watch this video, and when we say to do a certain action, you are going to try to match your ruler to that action. And so in the video, it was, you had someone saying, okay, rest position. So you're holding out your ruler in your hand, and then it's, the guy would say, you know, um, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth. He would say some combination of numbers, and judging on what number he said, you had to move the ends of the ruler in such a manner. You were essentially trying to like match the hands on a clock. So again, if he said, 8, 11:30, 5, 7, you had to move the ruler to try to match that. And I think what this was doing, I think what they were trying to ascertain from their auditions, again, I don't think this was so much for the puppeteering aspect. What I think this was, and I have nothing to back this up on, but what I think it was that this was meant to test if people could hit their marks, if they could essentially follow instructions quite literally down to the second. Because when it comes to puppeteering and live action elements and animation, all of that has to be perfectly in sync. There can't be any room for error with that. They have to have it all follow suit, so that way it can all, you know, coincide with one another, where the animation can be fluid between that and the puppeteering between that and the live action. Of course, you can try to polish things up with editing, but I more so think that, again, had I been hired, had I been on set for this in whatever capacity, I think that this was a test to see that if the director or the producer or whoever, if they said, okay, and you're gonna go, left, right, left, left. You're gonna throw left punch, right punch, left, left. Okay, you got it. Okay, you're gonna do that all instead of 4 seconds. Okay, ready, go. Action. I think it was meant to see if I could hit certain actions and elements on time in unison without much preparation. Again, I have no idea what this was for. It was clearly meant to test timing and reaction speeds and so on and so forth, but again, I don't know what this was for. No plot details were given, no character descriptions were given, but I do know that this was for uh, Dynamic Duo, because again, this was via Swaybox Studios, and they are linked to DC Studios and Warner Brothers Animation. And so, yeah, ultimately, Swaybox Studios did get back to me, and they did say we're going to go in a different direction, but we appreciate your time. We appreciate you submitting. And look, uh, I I love movies. Like that should be very clear from this very podcast itself. And beyond that, I also really enjoy superhero stuff. I love Marvel, DC, you name it. And as I've said before, I started the podcast late in my appreciation for the radio medium. However, at the time that I chose to start the podcast, it seemingly was at a great time because that was right when DC was starting their new brand of storytelling, all these new movies, these new shows, event, future games, so on and so forth. And so, like, as the podcast was developing, so was DC Studios, meaning I could talk about Superman and the upcoming Supergirl movie and the new Batman, you name it. Like there was just this endless supply of things to talk about. It was incredibly exciting for me being someone again who had just started a podcast and as someone who also has a deep appreciation of the superhero genre of storytelling. And then to get an opportunity, which doesn't come very often in people's lives, but to get an opportunity to go from just talking about it and covering it and being excited about it to literally potentially being a part of the creation process of that. I mean, it would have been a dream come true. It would have been a dream come true for me to have been a part of any movie. This audition could have been for a drama, for a comedy, who knows? You know, like, you know, the top 1% of the top 1%, get to be inside of the movies that they want to be. Like I would love to be a part of any production. I'm not going to say like I want to be a part of Star Wars. Well, get in line, kid, because everyone and their mother wants to be a part of Star Wars. You know, like it's not like I'm going to be, beggars can't be choosers when it comes to this type of stuff. You have to go where things lie. But the idea that not only was there a public audition process, but the fact that it was involved not only in the superhero side of things as well, but that it was a part of the new DC Studios brand of making movies. Just to have submitted an audition, to have taken a chance on myself, to have shoot my shot, as the kids say, uh, like that to me is crazy. It makes everything seem a little more real. And look, I'll say this, like again, I have no idea what they would have wanted me to do in what capacity. I don't know what it was for, but had I been selected, had I have been chosen to be part of this project, I would have given it everything I had. Everything. Fun fact for that too. They said that the progression process was if we call you back and we say we want you to do another audition, we want you to submit more footage of yourself, it would have been a one-on-one with someone at Swaybox, and so it would have been another Skype call, Zoom call, whatever. And then eventually it would have been an in-person audition or in-person evaluation, either in Los Angeles, California, or New Orleans, Louisiana. I think that's where New Orleans is, yeah. And then eventually, had I been fully selected, saying I got the job, the role is yours, I would have had to move to New Orleans. I would have had to have done that. And I don't travel very often. Um, and the idea of me leaving my home and my family and my friends for potentially years to be a part of this project sounded very daunting. But I would have done it. I would have relocated to New Orleans to pursue this because it would have been a dream come true in so many different ways. And I'm not saying this as like, dang it, you should have picked me. And I'm not saying give me your pity, but I'm just saying like you know if you love storytelling enough, you the listener, if you love storytelling enough, you can tell a good story, whether that's through books, music. If you want to create something, go create something. That's what me and my friend Francisco Sojourn One try to do through Two Go, our our music project. That's what I'm trying to do as well by getting mine published. And I think kind of the end game for people is that everyone wants to be a movie star. At least some point in their life, everyone watches a movie at some point and wishes I could do that. I wish I could do that. And some people pursue it with a hunger and a fervor that gets them to literally be a film star, and like just the idea that I got just a little bit closer to pursuing that dream. Like that to me was just awesome. And also not for nothing. I'm totally going to hang my hat on this until I die, and I'm going to this is going to be a medal on my chest for forever, even though it's well exaggerated. Um, was I a part of the production of Dynamic Duo? Again, they told me that they're going to go in a different direction. However, in choosing what is the best path forward for a creative project, you have to also know what is not the best path forward. And so I like to attribute their decision to go elsewhere, be a part of that process. And so, in some weird, twisted, blurry, fragmented way, was I a part of the production of DC Studios movie? Yes, I was. So it's like it's like um, you know, you know, I go work at the Vikings organization in the NFL. You know, offices, I'm in the building, and they're like, "Hey, what did you do?" "Oh, I was the assistant to the assistant to the assistant to the water boy." I would have considered myself, a part of the team, because it's like I'm gonna hang my hat on that too, And so, in some weird way, I do think that that I had a very, very, very small role to play when it came to the production of Dynamic Duo. But hey, I will take that very, very, very small bit, and I will keep it close to my heart because, man, like, could you imagine um, to have been a part of that, and just to say that I auditioned for a DC movie, that I auditioned for a superhero movie is is crazy. And not for nothing. I'll also say this too, not for nothing. Um, let's assume I could have gotten to pick the role. Well, first of all, if they selected me and they said, "Hey, it's carte blanche. You tell us what you want to do, Mr. Mosey, Mr. Podcaster." I would have said, "Okay, I don't want to be the physical performance. I want to be the voice of a character." They say, "Great, sounds good. You have a good voice, or at least we think you do. We've listened to your podcast. What character do you want to voice?" I would have chosen Red Hood. I really would have. Like, look, like I'll be any character they want me to be, but like again, if I could have got to have picked like between the two leads, Nightwing and Jason Todd, Red Hood. Red Hood to me is very interesting because again, he is a failed attempt at a Robin, and he becomes a villain of Batman who was trained by Batman. Whereas Nightwing is the heir apparent to the Batman character, to the cape and cowl, so much so that in comic adaptations, Nightwing at some points has literally dressed up as Batman. I don't mean that like, in such a negative way, but like sidebar. In some versions of Batman storytelling, when Batman gets incredibly injured from a fight, like he breaks his back or something, literally breaks his back, um, he reaches out to Dick Grayson and he's like, "Hey, look, I'm down for the count. And even though I'm Batman, I can't heal myself inside of 10 minutes. I'm down for like at least 10 weeks here. Um, Gotham needs a Batman. My presence as Batman has been so effective against crime in Gotham that for me to go away, for the Batman to disappear for a bit, it would be catastrophic. I need you, Dick Grayson. I need you, Nightwing, former Robin, to step into my shoes, literally, and become Batman, to carry on the mantle, even for a small time being, just to preserve the peace that I'm working towards. And I know you can do it. I've trained you. You're more than capable. You are the best that I could ever hope to be. Please do this." And so Bruce Wayne has seen that Nightwing is on a well enough level to be a diet Batman emergency pitch, excuse me. So that would have been great to have been again, someone very close to Batman in that capacity. But Red Hood to me is much more interesting because again, he's the antithesis of that, where Red Hood, you know, uses guns, kills people. He's a much more lethal version of Robin, of what a Batman could be. And so having that character dynamic of someone who is so broken, who feels so betrayed by his former master, by a quasi father figure, from Bruce Wayne, I think I really could have just gone to town with that. Plus, Red Hood is just freaking cool. He's got on cool body armor, a leather jacket, a modified red helmet, and stuff like that. Like I think I could have just had a field day with that. Like you left me, Bruce. You abandoned me. Like, oh man. I mean, could you imagine? And if you play the Batman Arkham Knight video game, spoiler. Um, the villain is Jason Todd, revealed to be Jason Todd. He's not Red Hood in that adaptation, but he again very similar trajectory as former Robin gets captured by the Joker, gets tortured, left for dead, so on and so forth. But instead of him assuming the mantle of Red Hood, he assumes the mantle of, quote, the Arkham Knight, and he's even more armored up. Looks more like an evil version of Batman, and he's destroying Gotham and destroying Bruce Wayne. And in that game, when they finally have a confrontation face to face, you know, he's like, "You left me to rot in Arkham for a year. Do you know what the Joker did to me?" I mean, he is just tearing into Bruce, not with his words, but not with his fist, excuse me, but with his words, saying like, "You left me, look what you did, I'm your failure." Like, I mean, it's very much kind of Obi-Wan to Darth Vader, where like, Anakin was best of the Jedi and he turned to the dark side and, he was, Obi-Wan's failure, and then, you go on to the Kenobi series and you have, Darth Vader tormenting Obi-Wan with that failure. It's very similar to that with Jason Todd and Batman and Bruce Wayne. Jason Todd is reminding Bruce constantly, you failed me. I didn't fail you. Everything that happened, every evil act that I've done to get back at you is because you put me on this path. And I think I could have just done a great job with that. Like Dick Grayson is the quasi Boy Scout, but Jason Todd, very rough and tumble, very aggressive, and I think I would have had a good time with that. But hey, look, again, I'm just happy to have been considered. I'm happy to have seen that um, that open audition call when I did. And look, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, and who knows? Maybe somewhere, somehow, some way, I can go back into the fold of DC, or heck, maybe even, yes, you, the faithful listener, perhaps you also submitted an audition tape to Swaybox Studios, and perhaps you yourself are dreaming of becoming an actor or a voiceover artist, what have you. And look, if I can do it, you can do it. And if I didn't get the role, then by golly, I hope you did too. And if you did get the role for Dynamic Duo, and if you're listening to this podcast right now, please, when all is said and done, even if it's after the movie comes out in 2028, come on the podcast and tell me what that was like. Because, yeah, but in the meantime, while I am not a part of Dynamic Duo from a production standpoint, I will be a part of Dynamic Duo from a fan standpoint. And I cannot wait to see that movie when it comes out in theaters June 30th, 2028. Anyway, kids, moving on, but keeping it in the world of DC Studios, there's a lot going on over there in tandem with Warner Brothers, and there is a new trailer for the upcoming Supergirl movie. And to accompany that trailer, there's also a poster as well. And oh, baby. Again, as I've just previously mentioned, when Superman was coming out, I was all over that, talking about every poster, every trailer, every image, so on and so forth. That movie very much was a large part of the production of the Far Out podcast. And Supergirl is going to be no different. I'm so in the bag on DC. I'm so looking forward to this movie. And to now be just 6 months away, which is crazy. This thing comes out in June, is nuts. And we now have a new trailer and a new poster. And I will say this. Admittedly, despite all my hype and, I can't wait for this movie, I thought that the trailer was good. Not bad. Not a bad trailer, but not a great one either. I thought it was good. And I will give it the benefit of the doubt because this is kind of more of a teaser, more of an announcement trailer for the movie. And so I'm not expecting there to be a lot of plot, and stuff like that. But what I found interesting is that, for the Superman movie, so much of it was presented literally in color. They were showing that this is This is not dark and dreary like Man of Steel. Respect that movie very much, but you know how it is. That's more of a straightforward drama. Superman, 2025 Superman, much more of a family-friendly popcorn movie type of, offering. So that thing was incredibly colorful, bombastic, a lot of fun. This movie, Supergirl, at least from its first trailer, appears to be literally more muted. There's not a whole lot of color in this trailer. There wasn't a lot of humor in it, but again, it's the first trailer. I'm assuming it's not going to be all, dark and dreary and all that stuff. But what's interesting is that this movie appears to be two sides of the same coin with its Superman companion in every facet. I think that there was a deliberate choice to have the Superman movie be quite literally more brighter, more colorful, and to have the Supergirl movie maybe be a little more on the darker side of things, both perhaps in tone and in color palette. Okay, so that's an interesting way to do things. Also, just from the literal source material that this movie is drawing from, Superman 2025, Superman drew from many different runs of the character, but I know that it drew heavy inspiration from a run called All-Star Superman, which I attempted to read prior to um, the movie coming out. I got kind of a collection of that comic run. That thing is incredibly weird. So much so that I had a hard time finishing it. It's incredibly bombastic, talking about cloning, different dimensions, just crazy powers and characters, and it's like it was too weird even for me. And I really enjoy superheroes and comic books, but like All Star Superman was it's really out there. It's really trippy, and that did get put into the Superman movie, and I did not love that movie. I thoroughly enjoyed it, but I didn't love it because again that movie is a little bit on the fringe as well. Again, drawing from its source material. Supergirl draws from a line of Supergirl comics known as Woman of Tomorrow. Formerly, this movie was actually titled Supergirl: Woman of Tomorrow because it was, meant to be a pure adaptation of that comic line. And I have that line of comics also on my shelf, and I've been reading Woman of Tomorrow, and I have not finished it, but what I have read of it, the source material is freaking great. And this book in particular, this collection of comics, it is more serious in tone, I believe, and it also has a lot of good action, and it has a lot of drama to it as well. At least from what I've gathered from about the 30 to 40% of it that I've read so far. So again, even just the source material itself it's drawing from is a little more on the more mature side, whereas All Star Superman is a comic book. Woman of Tomorrow is much more of this kind of fantasy sword swinging epic, so on and so forth. But I really like the source material. I really have enjoyed it. I just haven't finished it yet, but I'm going to look forward to probably rereading the whole thing at least two times through prior to the movie coming out. And also so from a literal color grading perspective, from a source material perspective as well, Supergirl is meant to be different from Superman, the movie. You also have to look at it this way too. From a literal character perspective as well, Superman, as we know, left Krypton when he was an infant. It happened during, when he was just, a newborn. His parents shot him off into space because they recognized the planet was dying, it was going to explode, so on and so forth. And so it was meant as a last ditch effort to literally to save their infant son, to blast him off into space. And so he has no memory of Krypton at all. Everything he's learned about his culture came from after he had been raised on Earth. And so for him, that's all history. He's lacking proper context for that. Yes, that was his people, his planet, Krypton, the Kryptonians, but he doesn't have that kind of emotional attachment to them. Supergirl, on the other hand, depending on how they choose to adapt her story, she was fully grown. She was a teenager, if not a young adult, when Krypton exploded. And so she has memories of Krypton. She has memories of living there, of having friends and family and a life, and then to have it all explode, to have it die, for her, she's much more jaded. She has an edge to her because she saw everything that she once knew get decimated, and again, depending on how they choose to adapt this, like in some versions of the comic, perhaps even in Woman of Tomorrow, I can't fully remember, Supergirl survives the destruction of Krypton, literally just like floating on a chunk of it. Like, I mean, she's just, just clinging to what remains of her civilization, literally and metaphorically, and so she's like she can mourn in a different way than Superman ever could, which makes her have a lot more of emotional depth as well. And so to have that also represented in the movie as well, to have her not be this good golly gee whiz, we got to go save everybody, to have her be like, no, like I'm kind of damaged. I'm kind of broken. Like I lost everything. Like, and I saw it all. Like, because in the trailer, you know, she talks about Superman and she says, someone asks like, "What's your cousin like?" Because Superman and Supergirl, they're cousins. And in the Supergirl trailer, someone's like, "What's your cousin like?" And she goes, "Oh, he sees the good in everybody," And then, but Supergirl says, "And me, I see the truth in everybody." And so she herself is saying, "Yeah, I'm a hero. I'm gonna fight for good. I'm gonna defend, the innocent. But like, you know, I'm not gonna be the Boy Scout. I'm not going to be the Girl Scout here. I call it like I see it. And I think that's also representative in the poster itself for Supergirl. Truth, justice, whatever. Like she's kind of over it. She's kind of over it because again, she saw her whole civilization, excuse me, explode. So on and so forth. So look, I'm looking forward to this movie. I'm just saying the trailer did not blow me away. The poster I think is awesome. That thing is incredible. DC has been putting out some banger posters lately. And also too, like in the trailer, we get to see Crypto, the super dog. He makes a return as well. That's great. We also get to see what looks like um, the capital city. I believe it's the capital. We get to see a city of Krypton in Kandor looks like it's isolated from the destruction of Krypton, and so there's a cool storyline in the Superman comics that revolves around the bottled city of Kandor. Yes, kids, there is a moment when Krypton is getting exploded, when it's getting destroyed, that the city of Kandor is preserved by the supervillain Brainiac, because he's the one that orchestrated the destruction of Krypton in the storyline, but he values their civilization, so he decides to not lose everything due to its destruction. I'm going to keep a piece of it for examination for a trophy. And he literally saves and miniaturizes the city of Krypton known as Kandor and puts it in a bottle and just keeps it as a trophy for his rampage across the stars. And it looks like in the trailer that we're seeing a city get covered in a dome type of shield. It looks like it's being preserved, which will eventually be shrunk into the bottled city of Kandor, which means that perhaps Brainiac could be a part of Supergirl. Perhaps we'll see him in this movie. He is rumored, if not outright confirmed, to be coming in another Superman movie set to be released in 2027. So, yeah, the fact that we could be getting Brainiac as a villain introduced in Supergirl is pretty cool. The fact that we could see uh, Kandor being saved, and having yet another piece of Kryptonian civilization also be preserved as well is also cool. And just the fact that we're getting to see a freaking Supergirl movie is awesome. Supergirl is cool. Okay, she just is, like, man, what a good time to be a DC fan. What a good time to be a movie fan. Where you got a Superman movie in 2025, you got a Supergirl movie in 2026, and then you got, another Superman movie coming out in 2027. I believe that one's titled Man of Tomorrow. I think. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, like just DC is just firing on all cylinders, man. It's pretty freaking great. And then continuing with DC, because again, they're just doing the Lord's work over there. Not only does DC storytelling exist on the big screen, but also the small screen as well, because there is a new DC centered TV show coming out on HBO Max, and this one is titled Lanterns, and this has to do with the Green Lantern Corps. And this is meant to be more of kind of a serious kind of crime drama, because Green Lanterns are more or less the space cops of the DC universe. And so the presentation for the Green Lantern TV show is done via HBO Max, and they're known for their hard hitting dramas. And that's what this appears to be, is that it's not going to be, like Guardians of the Galaxy so much as it's going to be more like True Detective, which I'm all down for. Like, I like when my superhero fare is treated with reverence and taken seriously. Make it fun, of course, make it fun at the end of the day. But like the idea that we're getting potentially a hard hitting, uh, take on Green Lantern that has to do with him solving intergalactic crime and whatnot. It's done via HBO. It's like incredible stuff here, and they've kept it pretty under wraps. They've just released a couple of images, and as you're seeing on screen here, among the several images that they have released thus far, a lot of them are just character focused. A lot of them look like they could just belong to any other drama on any other network. But a few of the images they've showed off the Green Lantern ring, which is the iconic emblem of that character. And that's what I'm latching onto right here is the fact that we have yet another shot of a Green Lantern ring. And I think it looks great. I can't wait to see this thing in action. I can't wait for this show to come out, both from a perspective of just storytelling via HBO as well. But I think when it comes to this, they will be able to have it be interesting enough to where even when they're not in the Green Lantern suit, when they're not fighting supervillains that way. I think the human elements, the literal boots on the ground type approach to it is also going to be interesting as well. And so then just to have them suit up to become Green Lanterns, I think it's going to just be icing on the cake, as it were. But yeah, just I love everything I'm seeing about this TV show thus far. I like the fact that it's being treated seriously, that it's going to be more of a drama as well. And I just think that this freaking ring just looks amazing. And yeah, so yeah, there is we have a lot coming down the pipe here for DC. We have a dynamic duo movie, which is animated and live action, coming in 2028. Then we have a Supergirl movie coming out in 2026, and then Green Lantern. We have a Green Lantern TV show of all things. I believe also coming out in 2026 as well. Don't quote me on that, but like, yeah, DC Studios, man, they're doing some crazy stuff over there. So yeah, it's a good time to be a superhero fan. So yeah, just sit back and enjoy is all I can say. Anyway, kids, moving on, but keeping it in the world of now TV. I finished a TV series recently. In fact, at the time of this recording, I finished it today. I finished the whole gosh darn thing, the last season of this show in particular. And I'm talking about the Jack Ryan TV series on Amazon Prime, which is simply just titled Jack Ryan. And Jack Ryan is a very interesting character. Of course, he comes from the world of Tom Clancy, existing in novel form, and then he's had numerous film adaptations as well, done by Harrison Ford and various other actors, also including Chris Pine. He was the last guy to take a bite at the apple when it came to Jack Ryan on the big screen, but then after that one kind of hit, landed with a dud. I like that movie a bit, but I understand really wasn't a smash hit. But after living on the movie screen for several iterations, Jack Ryan then went to Amazon Prime and existed via a TV show. And John Krasinski, Jim Halpert himself from The Office, he played Jack Ryan, and I thought he did it to really good success. This show ran for 4 seasons from 2018 to 2023. And I remember when this was coming out, I remember when Krasinski was announced, and I thought, what a peculiar choice. Not a bad choice, but again, when you think of Krasinski, you will think of him as being, Jim Halpert from The Office, because again, that's his predominant role, and that kind of wrote his ticket for everything. And of course, nowadays he's also known for being a big time director. He of course wrote and directed and starred in the movie A Quiet Place, and I think that movie is a real triumph as well. And so he has done incredible work both on camera and behind the camera as well. But then he decided to step back into a leading role when it came to the role of Jack Ryan here. And I'll say this: the show overall was quite good. I again, like I said, I remember watching this thing throughout college, and then I kind of fell off it because there were a few years in between seasons. And I got to be honest, the series has never been great. It's never been drop dead amazing. But I remember it fondly. I remember really enjoying it. Watching season 1, 2, and 3 to middling success. Like if I were to give a rating of each season, now that the series is done, I would say that season 1 was their best overall. I would give that a 7.5 out of 10. And then I would give season 2, while still good, I thought was more of a step backwards. I give that a 6.5 out of 10. And then regarding season 3, a little more of a step up, a step in the right direction. I give that a 7 out of 10. But then season 4, having just now finished it today and getting to rank it alongside the other seasons in the series, I gotta be honest. I thought season 4 was terrible, just terrible. I would give season 4 a 4.5 out of 10. Despite me saying everything I have said about the Jack Ryan series thus far, about me enjoying it, about me enjoying the character, about liking Krasinski and recognizing his talent in the film and TV industry, I thought season 4 was a real dud. I here's the thing too is that we now live in a world of TV production where back in my day, we used to have TV seasons that lasted like 15, 20 episodes. Now we're lucky to get like 10 or 12. So each season of Jack Ryan was 8 episodes long because sure. Well, the fourth season of Jack Ryan was shortened even more so, whereas seasons 1, 2, and 3 were all 8 episodes long. Season 4 was 6. And I had thought that that was for production value. I had thought that, oh my gosh, they're going to put so much into each episode that, they're going to spend, the money worth 8 episodes onto 6. There's going to be so much action, so much cool set pieces that they can't fit all of it, you know, inside of the traditional 8. They got to go for the big, grandiose 6. And it was like, no, the 6 pack of episodes that is Jack Ryan season 4. Um, I wasn't here for it, man. I thought, as I was watching the season, I thought this either should have been longer or shorter because this season, despite it being the shortest of the bunch, this thing felt so incredibly long. This thing just meandered through so much walking and talking and exposition, and there wasn't enough action. And I'll defend it a little bit. The action that was there is quite good, and when the thing does put the pedal to the floor, it's good. But man, you have to just trudge through mud to get there. I wasn't interested in the main plot. I was more interested in the subplots. I really wasn't feeling an overall connection to the characters this time around. Of course, John Krasinski as Jack Ryan was amazing. Wendell Pierce as James Greer, kind of his go-to right-hand man, was also great as well. But everybody else, I thought, just wasn't really doing it for me. And then in this season in particular, in comes Michael Pena, and he's a co-lead in this as well. I thought he was underutilized. A different role for him as well, because I think people think of Pena as being more of a comedic type of guy. In season 4, he's much more serious, much more somber. I thought they could have done more with him too. And like again, this season of TV was a lot of walking and talking. And so I either thought, A, you need to condense the walking talking of it all and put it into 4 episodes and just get us in, get us out, just like that, or you have to stretch it a little more, get it back to the traditional 8 that you've been working inside of, and then you could sprinkle in more action and stuff throughout the season. Because I'll say this, despite me giving such a terrible review of the season overall, this thing does land the plane at the end there. This thing is backloaded 100%. And so episodes 5 and 6, that's where it gets good. That's where they say, hey, look, we're Amazon Prime. Here's the money. Go spend it, make it look good. That's where that all went to. But man, in my opinion, it's just not worth it. I had to sit through 4 episodes of just, I hate to say it, boring television to get to a pretty bombastic end. But man, I mean, it like I was happy that the series ended in the way that it did, because again, the last 2 chapters of season 4 were quite well done, action wise, tension wise, you name it. But like, man, what an uphill climb it was. I will say this though too, um, about the ending of season 4. Again, I've watched a lot of TV in my day. I've watched a lot of movies. I've seen a good number of Jack Ryan iterations as well. Um, they do some really interesting things with their action and with their torture and interrogation scenes in particular that I had never seen before. In all the years I've watched stuff, they found new ways to make me like recoil, not in like a horrific way, but in like a, oh man, like that looks like pretty intense, and I've never seen that before. Like, good for you, for you. And so, Jack Ryan season 4 has surprises. It does, and it has good elements to it, but man, for me, it was buried under all this unnecessary stuff. And again, I don't mean to just kill this project, but I really think at the end of the day, Jack Ryan season 4 exists as kind of this lopsided cherry on top because I don't think they really knew what to do. When I remember when season 4 was announced as the final season, I thought that felt kind of abrupt, in my opinion. And to kind of feel that throughout the season itself, the season overall just feels abrupt. And I think that that's kind of evident of maybe their lack of cohesive thinking when it comes to this. I will say this though, the literal last button on the end of the series, again, spoiler for it, but like they leave the door open. They don't close the door completely. They leave it open a crack for future adventure. So much so that Amazon has announced that a Jack Ryan movie, yet another movie in the Jack Ryan mythos, is coming via Amazon, and it will star John Krasinski in the role. So presumably, this is going to be a follow up, a continuation of the series, the original 4 seasons. Is this going to go to theaters? Is this going to be an Amazon Prime exclusive? We're not fully sure, but it does star Jack Ryan, and it will follow the same continuity as the other as the previous show. So look, overall, Jack Ryan was a good, fun watch. It's just, in my opinion, and you know, your enjoyment of it will certainly vary over myself. But like, if I'm gonna watch Jack Ryan, if I would recommend Jack Ryan, I would say stop after season 3. I I think season 1 is the crown jewel of the 4. I think season 2 and 3 are passable, between a C plus to a B minus, and I think season 4 just went completely off the cliff there, except for the end, except for the very end of it. So yeah, Jack Ryan, in a world where we have characters like James Bond, Jack Reacher, Jack Ryan is one of those names that's kind of just synonymous with spy military storytelling, and there will certainly be another adaptation of Jack Ryan in the future. But for the time that we've had Krasinski in the role, and for the time that we will have him continuing in the role, uh, I think it was a lot of fun. I'm very happy to have seen this adaptation. I think Amazon makes some pretty good television, and I think that this is a good piece to their collection. Not the greatest overall, but I'm looking forward to Krasinski coming back in the role for this movie. Hopefully, it goes to theaters. But yeah, Jack Ryan season 4, not good. But Jack Ryan as a TV series on Amazon Prime, overall, pretty good. And so, if you decide to check it out, comment down below and let me know your thoughts. All right, kids, let's circle back to the world of movies for just a minute here. Uh, Kids, in a world of movie experiences, of having the theater going experience be transformative, being memorable, no one else does it quite like Christopher Nolan. I mean, this guy is a tour de force, having done such movies as the Dark Knight trilogy, Inception, Interstellar, and most recently, Oppenheimer. I mean, this guy is a Hall of Fame filmmaker. This guy makes exquisite stuff. And to follow up uh, Oppenheimer now, he is doing an adaptation of Homer's Odyssey, and his new movie titled The Odyssey is coming in 2026. And this is going to be a big freaking movie. And there are some new pictures out showcasing some set pieces as well as some upcoming action sequences, and giving us a look at the cast as well, such as like Matt Damon and Robert Pattinson and Tom Holland. And this movie is one of my most anticipated of 2026. Supergirl might be number one, but The Odyssey might also be number one as well. I mean, I can't decide yet which one I'm more excited for, either Supergirl or The Odyssey. But The Odyssey is coming, and again, there are new pictures here, and this thing is going to be unlike anything we've ever seen before. And like in the world of sword and sandal epics, I think that even though it's a fantasy movie, and this is too, admittedly, but like, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the original trilogy done by Peter Jackson back in the early 2000s, that is still, in my opinion, the true cream of the crop, the bread and butter when it comes to the sword and sandals epic. When you think of that kind of movie, I think you think of Lord of the Rings because that's done with so much reverence and artistic integrity and character. That I don't think anything has really ever topped it. The Odyssey might, from a pure production value standpoint, because Christopher Nolan loves to do things for real. He loves practical effects. He loves practical sets, real costumes, so on and so forth. This thing looks like it's going to be an absolute riot, and I'm here for it. And the Odyssey is being leveled as such a big picture for us to see that um, the studio Universal put exclusive tickets out a year in advance to mark the movie being 1 year away. They had an exclusive ticket sale for IMAX screens. So, I mean, they are building up hype with this thing, with ticket sales, with posters, with promotional images, much like these. They're saying that this is going to be event cinema come 2026. And I can't wait for it. I truly think this thing is going to be incredible. And I love the images as well. I cannot wait for it. Again, I do not know what I'm more excited for, either Supergirl or the Odyssey. But yeah, the Odyssey done by Christopher Nolan is coming in 2026, and this is gonna be crazy. These images look amazing, and I cannot wait for this movie. And so, kids, if you liked his previous movies, such as Oppenheimer, Interstellar, Dunkirk, you name it, uh, Christopher Nolan has yet another movie coming out, and it is only a couple of months away. And so, yeah, baby, get excited for the Odyssey coming out in 2026. And finally, kids, I want to talk about my Minnesota Vikings, my favorite football team, because a lot has happened with the team, including my relation to them as well. And I just want to talk about what's going on with the team and where I think they're at and where I think they might be heading. But there's been some trouble in Purple Town over the month of December. And I gotta be honest, I'm not happy about this. I'm really not happy about this. If you don't know, there is a player on the Minnesota Vikings, or there was, I should say, a player whose name is Adam Thielen. He is a wide receiver in the NFL, and he's had an interesting career, especially an interesting career in relation to the Vikings. He was a Minnesota Viking from 2013 up to 2022. And look, he was never, in my opinion, he was never stellar. When you think of great wide receivers, you think of people, especially for the Vikings, you think of like, Justin Jefferson, Stephon Diggs, you know, um, Percy Harvin, so on and so forth. We might think of Adam Thielen, with more reverence now, now that his time as a Viking has passed. But like, I never thought he was an incredible player, but he was a native of the area. He was a homegrown guy and so on and so forth. And for him to have come from Minnesota State University, in Mankato, and to be in the NFL professionally with his home team, like that was really special. And he was a Viking from 2013 to 2022. And though I got into the Vikings only a few years ago, I remember seeing Adam Thielen. I've watched his highlights. He was a fun player, and I really appreciated his presence on field. Well, in 2022, or pardon me, 2022 is his last season with the Vikings. In 2023, after doing 9 years, so nearly a decade with the Vikings, he signs a 3-year deal with the Carolina Panthers, who, respect to the Panthers, but they're not a good organization. They're not known for winning it big and the whole deal. He goes and plays with the Panthers for 3 years, and he had success with the Panthers over his time there with them. But he, in my opinion, he kind of had less of an impact with the Panthers than he did overall with the Vikings, and there was a lot of friction about him leaving. You got the sense that he himself was disappointed to have left the Vikings, including his own family. His family members of his were very vocal about how they felt that they, didn't want to leave Minnesota. How, again, this was their home from the time he was in college to almost the entirety of his professional career, and for the Vikings to part ways with him, kind of left everyone on a sour note, from the fans to Thielen himself to, again, members of his family, and there was this kind of separation where it's like I remember seeing Thielen as a Panther, and I thought like, man, if he could just come back, if we could just get him back, if only we didn't let him go. We were kind of looking at each other, still thinking about you type deal. Well, anyway, that happened after so much time with Carolina and him having middling success over there. Still a good wide receiver over there with Carolina. The Vikings got him back in 2025, and it's like this is great. Welcome home. Like welcome home to Minnesota, to the Vikings. Like everything is right with the world now. You can continue to play alongside Jefferson and Addison, and we got this new young quarterback named JJ McCarthy. Like it's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. And then the 2025 season starts, and Thielen, admittedly, was more of a hindrance than I think he was an asset. He did not get a lot of targets. The targets he did receive, he was dropping a lot. He did not have a lot of catches, and he really wasn't doing a lot for the team. Again, for myself, being a fan, being a North Dakota, Minnesota native, I was just happy to have him back, and I was just very thankful for him to be on the field in whatever capacity he was, whether he was lighting it up or just kind of being someone to have in that locker room to bolster the spirits. I was like, good, this is how it should be. Well, on December 1st, 2025, so in the same season, he comes back for the start of the 2025 season, and then throughout this season, on December 1st, the Vikings release a statement on Twitter, and I will read this for verbatim. And it says, again, this comes via December 1st. Last week, Adam's representation approached the team and asked if we would be willing to release Adam, expressing his desire to play a bigger role in the remaining weeks of what he has indicated will be his final NFL season. Let me reread that. Quote, last week, Adam's representation approached the team and asked if we would be willing to release Adam, expressing his desire to play a bigger role in the remaining weeks of what he has indicated will be his final season in the NFL. Going on, following discussions throughout the weekend and out of respect for Adam, we have agreed to give him the opportunity to pursue more playing time elsewhere. Adam is one of the all-time great Vikings, and we wish him and his family continued success. End quote. Okay. Here's how I break this down. This is how I swallowed this. December 1st. Adam Thielen was a Viking. He left the Vikings, not on his own accord, goes to Carolina, has a so-so time, and the whole time he's in Carolina, he's wishing, as are we, myself included, thinking, gosh, if I could just come back to the Vikings. It's where I belong, man. Then he comes back to the Vikings. Crazy. A true miracle, in my opinion. Comes back to the Vikings. Can't even finish out this season, which he's now stating to be his last season, and he's saying that Adam's representation approached the team and asked if the Vikings will be willing to let him go. So, my conclusion is that Adam Thielen didn't so much want to be back with his team as he did want to be on a winning team. Sounds to me like he was more prioritized with winning than he was with being where his roots were. Now look, I'm not an NFL player. I never will be. And if I were to have been granted that kind of job, I would be chasing trophies. That's really kind of the end game here. Everyone wants to win a Super Bowl. Everyone wants that trophy. They want their rings. So from that perspective, I get it. That Adam Thielen realizes, look, the time I get to do this as an NFL player is very limited. I want to ultimately be on a team that can win that trophy. I understand that it's not just about catching the ball and being on the team. He wants the end game. Okay, I get that. But again, talking about his history in the NFL, he wasn't happy to leave the Vikings. And lots of the fandom weren't happy to see him go either. And to have him come back was amazing. It felt like the ship had been righted. And now for him, for it to have been reported that he didn't even want to be here for the remainder of this season, which he's now indicated to be his last season. He didn't want to end his career in Minnesota because it says via this statement released from the Vikings, Adams' representation approached the team. The team did not approach him. He approached the team. And he said, look, I appreciate this. I've been here before. Happy to be back here, but we're just not doing good enough. We're not winning games. It's frustrating. I want to finish out my NFL career on a higher note. And so he leaves and he goes and gets picked up by the Pittsburgh Steelers. Look, I don't know Adam Thielen. I've never met him. You know, and I'll admit the 2025 Viking season has been poor. It's had moments of spunk and awesomeness and optimism and all that stuff. But yeah, overall, it has not been a good season. And like I said, Adam Thielen is not getting a lot of attention with the ball. And when he does, he's dropping some of those passes. But like for him to leave halfway through the season, I got to be honest, I find that really disrespectful. And I can't get over this wordage here. Adam's representation approached the team. Like, it would have been one thing if the Vikings said, hey, look, thanks for coming back, but we realize now this isn't really working out. If you want to leave the doors open, we're not going to hold you here. You know, I could have understood that. I could have understood that. But for Adam Thielen, again, to have roots here throughout his first decade of playing, to go to Carolina, for there to be for there to be a public rift between football organizations about where he wants to be and where he feels he should be. You know, and for him to come back in 25, this is where he should have ended his career. And he could have. He could have. There aren't many weeks left in this season. But for him to jump ship last minute to chase one last gasp of glory because he feels that it won't happen with the Vikings, I got to be honest, I find it insulting. You know, and off of everything I said about his presence on the field, his mentality, his locker room ability to hype up everybody else, I feel like that's just been tainted to a degree. And look, if I ever see Adam Thielen at a bar, I will shake his hand and buy him a beer, and I will be friendly and cordial. But I just, man, to have him again, as I've said before, to have him leave, be upset about him leaving the Vikings, then to have him come back, and then to have him be so upset now again, so much so that he wants to leave in what is now determined to be his last season of the Vikings or last season of the NFL. He couldn't even stick it out a few more weeks. He said, "This is too bad for me." I just I really am disappointed in that. And look, I'm not pinning it fully on him. Perhaps there was some form of mutual agreement with this to where maybe both sides of the party were thinking it. Maybe Adam was thinking this isn't working. Maybe the Vikings were thinking this wasn't working. But again, the quote here, Adam's representation approached the team, meaning he knocked on the door first and said, let's talk about it. And like I don't know. I don't mean to put words in his mouth, and I know I did earlier, you know, and I apologize for that. I'm sorry, but like this really does kind of sour my opinion on him a little bit here because um I really wish he would have had a greater respect for his roots, you know, and look, he was a Viking, he always will be a Viking, but for him to just, in my opinion, just jump ship when he thought things weren't going great, I found just not in good taste at all, you know. And then to kind of capitalize on that, the Vikings go to Seattle. We get absolutely hosed by the Sea Pukes, the Seahawks, and lose like 26-0. We had Max Brosner starting at QB. Also a Minnesota native as well. We were expecting him to have a better day. He did not, but I'm glad that he got his shot with, again, his local homegrown team. He tried his best, and now he can forever hang on his mantle that he was a starting quarterback, at least for one game, but it did not work out for him. But then going on now to a little more of a personal thing with myself here. We go play the Washington Commanders, formerly the Redskins, and we hosed them 31-0. So the Vikings lose 26-0 against the Sea Pukes, and then we go and just trounce the former Redskins 31-0, back to back shutouts. Just on different sides of the coin there. And boy, Mr. Thielen, I bet you wish you could have been a part of that. Like, again, I don't mean to kill him, but I'm so irritated by the whole thing. But yeah, I was in attendance for that Commanders game. And now let's switch gears into something much more positive regarding the Vikings. I was there, kids. I was there because this was part of a friend's bachelor party. We went to that game. And look, there's been a lot of talk about J.J. McCarthy and how he's a bum, he's a bust, Vikings made a mistake, so on and so forth. My opinion, as I've said before, and I'll continue to say over and over again, it's too early to determine that kind of conclusion for him. Though this is technically his second year in the NFL on paper, this is really more so his first because he was injured his first year. And yeah, he's had a hard go of it. Interceptions, sack rates are up. He seems to be kind of a deer in the headlights, but there's been glimpses of goodness. Against the Bears in week 1, kid lights it up. Against Detroit, in whatever week that was, kid lights it up. You know, then in and then this last game that I went to against the Commanders. Admittedly, the Commanders, not a great team overall. God bless you, but like you know where you're at. He lights it up, 31-0. 31-0. That wasn't scored via kicks. Not all those touchdowns, were ran in by our running backs. Like the kid got the ball down the field. He was marching. And so like the JJ McCarthy haters sure were quiet when he started doing that stuff. And I'll just say this. Despite all the friction, despite all the hiccups, the mishaps, the blown tires, you name it, he is my quarterback. He is, so much so that I got a freaking jersey of his and I wore it to the game and I inaugurated it at US Bank Stadium. And boy, what a great game to have that one be broken in on. Again, 31-0. Let's go. But look, he is my quarterback. And seeing glimpses of legitimate greatness against the Bears, against the Lions, now against the Commanders, I think the kid has the goods. I really do. And I wish that the fandom at large would not, throw in the towel so early on him. I wish that we'd all give him a chance. And look, it might take a couple of years. Again, that's a long time to ask, I understand. And like I said, in the NFL, players have a very limited time. You're lucky to get a decade, and so look, it's not like we have an overabundance of time, but like Patrick Mahomes took a couple of years. Josh Allen took a couple of years. I think one of the Peyton brothers as well. Like, these things take time. And I just wish people would give McCarthy more time. But in the time that I got to see him live and in person and in action, the kid was slinging it. So he's my quarterback. He is. And I hope he has continued success in the remainder of the 2025 season. And I hope that he has continued success into 2026. There's talk about if he will be the starting QB come 2026. Perhaps we're going to have to hire a professional backup and more of a veteran guy and maybe teach McCarthy a little more. Who knows what the future holds for the Vikings? I certainly do not. But I think that if he can light it up in the remainder of this year and show the world that, hey, it took me some time, but now I've got it. Now sit back and watch. I think we're going to be golden. And I think he is meant to be our franchise QB. I think he could be the face of the team for the next 10 years. And he is my quarterback. He's my quarterback. Because again, as I've said before on this podcast, I was there also at US Bank Stadium when he was announced as the draft pick. I was there when team history was made. With I think he was sixth or seventh. With the sixth overall pick in the first round, the Minnesota Vikings have selected J.J. McCarthy, in the place went, wow. Like I was there, and I don't want to see that door get slammed in his face so quickly. Could the kid end up being a bust? Yeah, but he needs more time. Let's all give him some more time. But for now, we have the Bears game, the Detroit game, and the Commanders game to look back on, and we have the remainder of the season to look forward to. But look, again, Mr. Thielen, if you're listening, and I know that you are, I'm sorry for kind of taking you to task there. I didn't mean to be so incredibly harsh. I'm just saying, from a fan who values this team and who values your contributions to this team, again, to have you seemingly jump ship um, before the season could finish and what is now labeled as your last season in the NFL entirely, to me, that really leaves everything on a bad taste. But I hope that he has success in Pittsburgh. And if he's listening, like I said, I know that he is. Come on the podcast. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about your career, both in Minnesota and Carolina and now Pittsburgh. And yeah, look, in a world where the Vikings can't win a Super Bowl, my number one pick would be probably the Colts. But in a world where neither of those teams could win, if by some strange miracle Pittsburgh could win, and if Thielen could be a part of a Super Bowl winning team, well, then I guess there's some good to have in that too. Anyway, kids, that'll do it for this episode of the Far Out Podcast. Again, my apologies to Taylor Kitsch. We ran out of time yet again, but we'll get you on here at some point. But well, that'll do it for this episode of the Far Out Podcast. Thank you so much for watching, for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, bye-bye.